Life Over Coffee. Conversations for transformation.
When mass shootings happen, many reasonable people stand on all sides of the gun control debate. Some folks want to limit the number of guns that we have and how we use them. Others want to eliminate guns altogether. And then some want more freedom regarding their firearms. The debate is ongoing. We all know this. But it always intensifies when there is a murder or a mass shooting. These shootings rip out our hearts as we try to comprehend what happened. And it doesn't matter how many times you hear of it or how much violence you watch on television, on social platforms. When you hear a story about people killing people, the sadness can really just overwhelm you. The initial response is to mourn. You grieve for the victims of the crime. You grieve for the families and friends of those who lost loved ones. You weep for a twisted individual who exchanged the truth of God for a lie. You struggle because the chattering class and political elites, they do not talk about God's solutions. He is the only one who can reverse the curse of the evil one who scored another victory with another shooting. When a murder happens, every platform's news is a steady stream from virtually every possible storyline, making it the perfect opportunity for the cultural evangelists to move the discussion into their corner. And why not? The senseless tragedy provides the pundits the platform to preach their gospel, and like any good cultural evangelist, they want to seize the moment. They're looking for converts. And as a matter of full disclosure, I do the same thing. When I write, I hope to grip and take you where I want you to go. I aim to show you Christ, the purpose of all my writings. The cultural evangelist plan is similar, but with different objectives and outcomes. The Bible is not their cherished presupposition or their hermeneutic. They begin with a heart-wrenching story, and then they launch into their politicized agenda. Gun control is one of those agendas, and every mass shooting presents the opportunity for them to pontificate. And what strikes me about the gun control argument is how the storyline always moves, or virtually always moves, from human responsibility to the fault of the guns. The accent mark slides from human responsibility to the inanimate object. If I didn't know what guns were, it would be easy to think they were free moral agents who exercise their will over humans. And there are three reasons for this. This is how they talk about it. Number one, it is gun violence. The cultural evangelist gives an inanimate object life and agency to cause harm. And then gun morality. The cultural evangelist gives an inanimate object morality to choose good or evil. And then gun power. The cultural evangelists give inanimate object the power to bring hurt to someone. And so I want to break that down into those three subgroups, and the first one is gun violence. The first shift in the argument is when the evangelist uses the term gun violence. This labeling is a subtle but astute change if you want to move the discussion from human responsibility to inanimate objects. Make them animated. It's a worldview difference between gun violence and human violence. This euphemistic maneuver happens when they make the weapon violent rather than the human. You can do the same thing with sticks and stones. It's rock violence if you hit me with a rock. If you hit me over the head with a stick, it would be stick violence. This misdirection moves the potential cultural convert from thinking less about people and more about sticks and stones and guns, which is more than semantics. It is actually an agenda. It is a cultural worldview designed to shape policy. Once we put the accent mark on the gun rather than the center wielding the weapon, we set ourselves up for or as secondary actors, passive aggressors, not primary culprits. The evangelist's argument is about guns as though the person who slaughtered the people was not guilty of his actions. And if you follow the logic, the solution is to incarcerate the gun control, rather than the gunman. Of course, the progressive left does not want to release more convicts on, they do want to release more convicts on the street. And so the assumption is if you manage all the inanimate objects capable of being used to hurt someone, you would solve the problem. I do not fault unbelievers for pushing this kind of agenda or expect an unbelieving media culture to put forth Christian values. Their argument is their worldview, and they cannot consider the doctrinal interplay between hamartiology, anthropology, and soteriology. They can't understand how violence comes from a sinful heart, not a gun. The gun is an instrument that a violent person uses to carry out his violent actions. An inanimate object has no ability, no power to harm anyone if a depraved soul chooses not to be the active agent in this nightmarish drama. A mass shooting is no different from the first recorded murder from this perspective. If the cultural evangelist argued the case back in Cain and Abel's day, he would push for rock control or stick control or whatever object Cain used to kill his brother. The second part to this is gun morality. Thus, the possession of guns is the problem. And though I agree with them partly, I reject how they position the argument and the word choices to disguise the real issue. The cultural evangelist gives an inanimate object morality, in this point, gun morality. For example, quote, if the assailant did not own guns, the victims would be alive today. That might be true, but I would never dismiss that kind of reasoning as though it's ludicrous or carries no validity, and so I agree in part. But the problem I have is where the gun controllers place the weight of the argument. They move the issue to the gun without mentioning the real culprit, if they did not own guns. If the assailant survives, he will stand trial for the hate crime. His weapons will not. He is the moral agent. There is only one culprit in this morality play. It is the assailant. He is the free moral agent who chooses to pick up an inanimate object and kill human beings. If they want to make a hypothetical argument by saying the assailant would not have killed if he had no gun, I could make an opposite argument saying that he would have killed them with something else, like a machete. Both opinions, mine and theirs, are speculative and actually miss the point. This is more of a moral problem than a gun issue. When our children use an object to hurt one of their siblings, the thrust of my response to them is not about the thing used. I'm addressing the heart of the person who made a moral decision to hurt one of their siblings. If God changes the child's heart, the objects around our home will not be weapons of destruction. Banning every possible thing that someone can use to hurt someone does not make sense when evil has gripped the hearts of fallen people. Because this is a moral argument, we do have a solution. But if the cultural evangelist gets his way by making it a gun argument, there is no solution. Not until the government can control all possible objects that people can use to kill someone. And even if that were possible, there is still the matter of human depravity. If sinful people are not held accountable for their immoral actions, there is no possible way to control guns or any other weapon of choice. Gun morality. And then the third point is gun power. Here is a quote from a cultural evangelist. He said, handguns do not enhance our safety. They exacerbate our flaws. They tempt us to escalate arguments and bait us into embracing confrontation rather than avoiding it. Initially, the evangelist talked about the violence of the gun, not the man wielding it. Then he placed morality on the gun rather than the man wielding it. Lastly, they give the weapon the ability to gaslight a human being. They bait us, they tempt us. Guns can cause us to sin by exacerbating, tempting, and baiting us to pick them up and shoot someone. That is gun power. James debunked this argument long ago when he addressed the source of our anger. The two verses that I want to share with you, they read as though they came out of today's newspaper. According to James, the gun did not exacerbate, tempt, bait the killer to kill. He murdered because there was something that he wanted, he could not get, so he chose to murder. This is how James talked about it. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? You desire and you do not have, so you murder. You covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. Saying guns tempt us is a common mistake. We all have done this. How often have you gotten angry and justified your anger by blaming something outside of yourself for the offense? The thing made me do that, or she made me do that. Anytime we look beyond ourselves to explain the cause of our anger, we're no longer walking in the truth. And though I appreciate anyone's desire to curb violence and make our culture a safer place to live, if we try to bring in social change while dismissing God's Word, we are deceiving ourselves, and the excellent desire we may want for society will never happen. Moving the storyline from appropriate mourning over the senseless deaths of people made in the image of God to the primary cause of those murders being something other than human responsibility is misguided and non-productive. Guns have no life, they have no morality, they have no power, but people do. The issue is that the human versus gun argument, it should not be an either-or debate. There is truth on both sides. The cultural evangelist is making it a one-sided view. The problem is with the gun. I gave a counter-argument. The primary concern is not with the gun. If the culture ever turns the argument back to the people behind the weapons, they would be in a better place for resolution. But I would not want to leave you thinking that there is no problem with guns. There is. If our child abused a sibling with an inanimate object, I would deal with their heart first, and then I would make sure there were rules to mitigate the possibility of it happening again. For example, it would be unwise for me to put a box of BBs on the kitchen counter for a child to act out their evil heart, perchance they wanted to hurt someone. That misguidedness would be foolish parenting because I would not be thinking through the doctrine of sin present in our child's heart. The answer is not legalism, absolutely no guns, or licentiousness, total gun freedom. I believe the murder rate could go down if there were stricter practices and policies regarding firearms, especially for those with criminal records. My point is not to say enacting policies won't work. God gave us policies and civil authorities because of our hard hearts. Policies can work to a degree, but the real issue will always be human responsibility versus hard-heartedness. We should have more productive dialogue regarding the main problem rather than shifting the discussion to lesser specious arguments. It would be more effective if our cultural evangelists wrote about moral issues like parenting, fatherless homes, firearm responsibility, and objective statistical demographics that are more likely to kill someone. I do hear you, cultural evangelist. I'm not going to leave a gun readily available for our immature child to pick up and use willy-nilly. I'm willing to embrace your worldview to a point. Let's talk about being responsible with guns, but do you hear me? Will you embrace my worldview that this is primarily a moral problem? As I wrap up, I want to ask you a few questions. Number one, what's your take on the gun control argument? Using the Bible as your primary source, will you make a case for what you believe? Number two, are you aware of the gun violence statistics? Where do most killings take place? What are some of the common denominators? What solutions would you like to see? Number three, which demographics are safer and what are a few reasons for it? Number four, how active are you culturally? Are you gathering, processing, and understanding the data? What should your role be in engaging the culture from a bibliocentric worldview? Number five, if you have children, how are you indoctrinating them about the cause of sin, as James said in anger, James chapter 4? What does walking out repentance look like in your life? And then finally, number six, are you tempted to blame outside sources as the cause of your anger? Do you do that? If you would like to read, watch, or listen what I'm sharing with you from our website, please go to lifeovercoffee.com. What you're looking for is a reasonable response to the gun control debate. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Thanks for joining us. Learn more and get access to other resources at lifeovercoffee.com.